You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host and bourbon-soaked storyteller, Juliette Miranda.
Hey there, y'all. It's Juliette Miranda, and welcome to episode 238 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. My bourbon-soaked story for you is about drugstore demons and the harvesters of decay. But first, I need a shot of bourbon. Cheers, y'all. Y'all, it is finally October, and I'm so stinking happy about it. One of the things I've been most excited about seeing after moving here is how the French Quarter kind of transforms for Halloween. You've got all this old architecture, the haunted history. I mean, come on, if there was ever a place made for Halloween, this is it. And thus far, I have not been disappointed. Little by little, you see things starting to creep up in the store windows. You know, there are pumpkins and skeletons and witches. Balconies are becoming all transformed with lights and cool scenes. And I think what I love most is the way that the sun has shifted just right, so there are all sorts of wild new shadows on our balcony. What can I say? Autumn is just a season that works for me on so many levels. Not the least of which is the fact that I don't feel compelled to be merry and generous. This probably explains why I love haunted houses so goddamn much. All of them, you know, the crazy extreme haunts that require waivers, to just the playful carnival-style walkthroughs. And it's funny because every October, my guy gets just a little bit twitchy when he sees me wistfully looking through haunted house websites. He's definitely not the fan of them that I am, and he's kind of more inclined to respond to jump scares with his fists. But he doesn't have to worry. We made a deal a long time ago that if he wouldn't ask me to go on roller coasters, I wouldn't ask him to go through a haunted house. And the arrangement suits us just fine. Besides, what I'm really more interested in are the elements that go into a haunted attraction. You know, the things that really scare a person. That's where the fun is. And I'll tell you, every so often, I fantasize about working in a haunted house. I would have no problem threatening people with a chainsaw or, I don't know, plunging a knife into something human-like and squishy for hours on end. Because although it isn't something that I've done in an official capacity, scaring people is something I do have a little bit of experience with. And it all started the October when I was 9. That really is the perfect age for Halloween. There's just a freedom to it when you're 9 because you're still a kid and you're not too old to shamelessly believe in magic and ghosts and being scared. Back then, Halloween was just an absolute glorious free-for-all, and I lived for it. Hell, I started planning for Halloween the second school started. And there were very important decisions to be made. Costumes, trick-or-treat routes, decorations. Sadly, my mother refused to let me decorate the house until at least mid-October, but she did give me free run of our basement. Oh, and what a basement. It spanned the entire footprint of the house. And it had everything. I mean, this space was huge. There was a workshop and a laboratory for my dad, a little workout area where I practiced ballet, craft nook, and just tons and tons of open space. There was so much potential down there. And over the years, I transformed the basement into all kinds of pretend concepts for play. One summer, it became a department store. When I went through my unicorn phase, it became an enchanted forest. But nothing, absolutely nothing will ever beat when I was 9 and I made my own haunted house. To be fair, this was actually my friend Bobby's idea. He was my best friend back then, which didn't exactly make my mother happy. He was 10 to my 9 and usually the one to pull me into trouble. Whether that was hurling smoke bombs and lawn darts into our neighbors' yards, or seeing just how fast we could ride our bikes around Dead Man's Curve in the park. So he and I had just seen the movie Poltergeist, and we were all hopped up on ghosts and talking about how it would be so cool to experience a haunted house in person, when it occurred to Bobby, we should make our own. Oh my God, why hadn't we thought of this sooner? For the next week, every minute we weren't in school was committed to creating the greatest haunted house known to kiddom. The stairs to the basement became a cemetery leading into a cobweb-covered entrance. From there, we had a corpse lounge, complete with every weird taxidermy animal and bag of bones I could snatch from my mother's voodoo collection. We doused my sister's play set with fake blood and 2 pounds of candy corn to make a murder kitchen. Even my dad's laboratory was part of it, and that fortunately didn't really need any help. I mean, it was perfectly creepy on its own with all of the power tools and Tesla coils. We had a dead baby bedroom, and then there was the seance room, which really was the perfect culmination of our creepy creativity. Bobby and I moved the round craft table to the center of an alcove and covered it with a dirty lace tablecloth. In the center, we fashioned a crystal ball out of an upside-down goldfish bowl stuffed with tissue paper and a flashlight. We surrounded it with bedsheet ghosts, cobwebs, and a large leather-bound book of witchcraft, and, well, we had what was to us the scariest room ever. For the first few days, we would creep around the basement with flashlights, playing the 1979 record of Walt Disney Studios' chilling, thrilling sounds of the haunted house in the background. When we got tired of scaring each other, we moved on to our siblings, and when that got old, we decided to invite our classmates over and scare them. Bobby acted as the ghostly guide, while I played the ghost. I would dash around the basement in the cover of darkness to bang on walls and slam doors. And the big finale involved jumping out from under the seance table wearing a drugstore devil mask and chasing everyone out of the room. This was so my favorite part, and I got disturbingly good at it. I would crouch under the table waiting until I heard Bobby's voice. He'd worked up a whole backstory about the spirits of our haunted manor. I would read a few lines out of a spell to try and conjure them up for our visitors. He'd wave his arms around and implore the ghosts to make their presence known, and this was my cue to attack. I would screech as I burst from under the table, maybe steal a few lines from The Exorcist about cocks in hell, which to my innocent young mind meant something about evil chickens and not sucking off the damned. And of course, everyone would scramble on out. The only trouble was that it was a little hard to see through that devil mask in the dark, and occasionally I'd trip and wind up falling on top of someone. Really, though, getting knocked to the ground just made the experience all the more terrifying, and word quickly spread through our grade school that Bobby and I were up to something evil. Oh yes, that's the word, evil. And I suppose now would be a good time to mention that Bobby and I went to a Catholic grade school. It was an odd place for me to wind up being educated. I mean, seeing as how my mother practiced witchcraft at home, which is literally the opposite of Catholicism. She'd always blown off my questions about why I went to school there and just say that I received an outstanding education, which is true enough, I suppose. Although I suspect her reasoning in sending me there included a deep, dark desire to fuck with the nuns. This school was run by a flock of nuns who ranged from occasionally pleasant to overwhelmingly beastly. My mother just delighted in tormenting them. Every year, she would donate 5 cartons of banned books to the library. And once she helped me organize an after-school pagan reading club. Unfortunately, it was me, not her, that took the brunt of the nuns' wrath. When they weren't trying to save my soul, they were condemning it. At least once a semester, my parents would be called down to the principal's office to discuss my questionable behavior. These meetings would always happen right around 10 a.m. or so, I'd be scribbling away in my phonics book when an office messenger would show up at my classroom door, just ready to escort me off to what always felt like a botched execution. And there in the principal's office, I would find the woman perched at her desk, black nun habit flowing around her like a death shroud, and my parents would be crammed into school desks in front of her. There'd be yelling and finger pointing and a not-so-subtle reminder that my tuition was paid in full. And I'd walk away unpunished and baffled about what the hell had just happened. This is exactly what I braced myself for the second week of October as I found myself walking next to Sister Juliette yet again to the principal's office. Unfortunately, I wasn't going to get off quite as easily this time because there was a small mob waiting for me. In addition to the principal and my parents, the room also included Bobby, his parents, 2 priests, and a classmate of mine that I'll call Ivy. She was accompanied by whom I could only assume were her parents, and this in itself was weird because she and I never really had much to do with each other. Ivy spent most of her time sucking up to the teachers and banging erasers after school by choice. Me, well, apparently I was holding satanic rituals in the basement with Bobby. Not that precious Ivy had ever actually been in my basement. She'd only heard about it and had run home crying to her parents about the horrors of our haunted house. Calls to the school were made, students were questioned, and the judgment was issued that Bobby and I were, in fact, Satanists. That's exactly what they called us. 2 little kids, 9 and 10 years old. Satanists. And to this day, I can still see my mother chewing on the inside of her face, trying to keep from laughing. My dad, meanwhile, is so enraged that he brings his fist down on the little student desktop so hard that it cracked, and he yells, "Nobody calls my kid a Satan worshiper." The room erupted then, and Ivy's parents are demanding that Bobby and I be expelled. My mother is yelling about freedom of expression, and I'm pretty sure those 2 priests had broken out the Roman Catholic rites of exorcism. 45 fucking minutes of this go by before the principal is able to regain control of the room. Much as I am sure she would have loved to expel us. She, 1, wanted our tuition money, and 2, had 0 legal standing to do so. What she did was try to get us to dismantle the haunted house altogether. She claimed it was only the right thing to do since it was so blasphemous. And this is where Bobby's parents and my parents decided to get involved. They flat out refused to break down this haunted house. Bobby's dad was especially upset. Now, this was a large dude, one who spent most of his time sitting in the back of the family's Italian bakery with several other large men. Us kids never really saw much of him, but we'd always been told to stay out of his way, and I was about to find out why. He stands up then, thrusting all 6 feet and 250 pounds of himself into the principal's direct line of sight, and he says, "What these kids do on our property is our business." His shadow seems to stretch over the entire room, and we all believed him when he said that he would take action if the school didn't stop wasting his time with this bullshit. Him swearing at the nun was shocking enough, and his threat landed. In the end, Bobby and I did not have to break down our haunted house, but we did have to agree to tone down the devil worshipping, and we were sent on our way. But this is not where the story ends. No. After school, our parents are waiting for us, and they want me and Bobby to take them through our haunted house. Now, they'd always been aware that we had this thing down in the basement, but now they want to see it for themselves. And they say, "Don't hold back. Show us everything." We did as we were told, right down to conjuring me up as a drugstore demon, and felt a little ridiculous the whole time. Our parents were nice about pretending to be scared while we acted out our parts, but both Bobby and I were sure that they were going to shut us down. That was usually how these things worked. Parents would say one thing to the teachers to save face and then do the exact opposite at home. But this time was different. First, our folks congratulated us on our creativity. Then, they informed us that we were going to be having a Halloween party. Just like that. You're having a Halloween party and you're going to like it. What? This was the first time I'd ever been threatened with a Halloween party, and I wasn't sure exactly what to make of it. Our two sets of parents look at each other and kind of wink and smile. And they say, don't worry about it. Just invite your classmates, keep working on your haunted house, and we'll take care of the rest. The party was held on the Friday before Halloween. It was one of those rare, perfectly crisp Midwestern nights when your Halloween costume is more than enough for warmth. My parents and Bobby's parents opened up their garages and let us kids run wild between them while they drank beer from a cooler in the back. Actually, my parents spent more time down in our haunted house than they did with the beer. In fact, they'd been down there with us all week, building new decorations and amping up the scares. The help was awesome, but Bobby and I couldn't really understand where their interest was coming from. Even the best parents back then would sooner wave from a distance than get involved with kid projects. But some weird nerve had been hit that made mine and Bobby's parents take this haunted house thing personally, I guess. I don't know. Hell, Bobby had found his folks out in the prairie earlier that day with a couple of spades and a bucket that they then tried to covertly deliver to my parents before the party. My mother snatched it away before I could look inside, and when I asked what the deal was, Bobby's mom said it was for decoration. Decoration? Again, that's fucking weird. But I had to admit, our folks had done an incredible job of improving our haunt. Now, instead of just opening the door to my dad's lab, he was there to usher people inside and play the part of a mad scientist. All of his Tesla coils were buzzing furiously, and he'd demonstrate how he could light up fluorescent tubes from across the room. He would send a few purple arcs of electrical current our way, because back then it was okay to shoot lightning bolts at small children, and everyone would dart out of the lab, only to be greeted by my mother in our new and improved murder kitchen. Several cauldrons of goo had been added to the display, and my mother would urge kids to put their hands inside to feel freshly harvested eyeballs and entrails. It was just grapes and spaghetti, but the difference is hard to discern in the dark. So there were many, many delightful screams and jumps and shudders the night of our party. For more than an hour, we brought kids down through the basement in groups of 3 and 4, until my parents called for a short break to regroup and reheat the intestines. Bobby and I ran back outside to play with our friends. We expect to find the same party we left, with 24 witches and vampires chasing each other around our yards. But a strange quiet had settled over the party. Now, kids are huddled in small groups, chatting in hushed tones and looking suspiciously over to Bobby's driveway. And that is where we found the true death knell of any good time: our school principal and Ivy's parents. My own parents have come out to join us, and I grab my dad's hand and I say, "You invited our principal? She'll ruin everything." Bobby is practically in tears because he's thinking, just like the rest of us, well, that's it, party's over. My dad pats me on the head and he says, "Don't worry, kid. No one is going to ruin your party." He then instructs me and Bobby to get ready to give our guests the full tour of the haunted house. And again, I have to ask my dad why he hates us, because we're only going to get into more trouble when the principal sees what's down there in the basement. And all my goddamn dad will do is say, "Trust me." Yeah, the last time my dad told me to trust him, I wound up getting stitches, so I can't really say I was all that excited to do it. Still, Bobby and I take our places in the basement, and we wait for our inevitable doom. My parents come down first, and they get situated in their little haunted spaces. Bobby's mom then leads our tormentors down the stairs. I hear her explaining, "Hey, we just thought you'd want to see how creative our kids have been, so you'll know that this is all just in good fun. Maybe you'll want to give them extra credit." Ivy's parents kind of harumph, and the principal says something that sounds like, "We'll see about that." None of them sound especially happy to be there, and I feel bad for Bobby, who's got to lead this group of bummers around. He does try, I'll give him that. He puts on his scary voice as he describes the lingering atrocities left by a family gone mad. I add in a few ghostly knocks on the wall, and as I do, Ivy's mom gets annoyed, and she says, "Ugh, is this really necessary?" Nothing we do seems to impress this group. They all have these snide little side comments about how we're perverting our minds with filth. Even my dad's lab falls short of their divine expectations. I notice that he's added in a little bit more, science behind his routine. It doesn't matter, though. He could have ordered his lightning direct from heaven itself, and this crowd still would have found fault. We're getting closer to my grand finale devil bit, and I'm getting nervous about it. I really am. I know they're not going to be scared, so I'm freaking out thinking, well, Christ, maybe I'll just make them mad. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to spend my entire school year in that stupid principal's office getting lectured. And really, I still didn't quite understand what the point in all of this was. It didn't seem like enough for extra credit. So I'm getting real close to just calling it quits when the group comes to my mother in her murder kitchen. Her cauldrons are out, and she cackles about cooking up all sorts of ghoulish treats for her guests. Now, I'm still crouched down by the lab door, which I had slammed in a ghostly fury earlier. And this part is usually my cue to quietly make my way under the seance table. But as I get up, I feel my dad behind me. He puts his hands on my shoulders and he whispers, "Stay here, kid." Bobby's mom, who had been trailing behind the group as a silent guide, she pulls Bobby back with us. It's too dark for us to see our parents' faces, but they shush us before we can say anything. Now, my mom is still playing the crazy kitchen lady, and she motions for the three adults to come closer and sample her macabre meals. The principal sniffs a few times, as if she can detect the scent of something foul, and she asks, "Is this going to stain my habit?" "I won't have stains." My mother, still in character, assures the principal that their fear will leave no marks. There's a bit of sighing, and again, the question of if any of this is really necessary, but they all reach forward to paw the contents of the first cauldron. Ivy's dad issues a triumphant little laugh, and he says, "Oh, grapes. Of course. What a waste of good food." The same happens with the second cauldron, where the spaghetti failed to conjure up any terror. But then my mom produces a third cauldron. This one she holds and says, "Perhaps I should spare you the contents of my final course of fear." The three adults are antsy now. Ivy's dad just wants to get on with it so they can all just go home. My mother shakes her head, and she informs them that the contents of her cauldron are just too horrible to share. But the adults are insistent now, and Ivy's dad practically rips the plastic bowl from my mom. They all thrust their hands in, and for a moment they're quiet. Ivy's mom sounds relieved as she announces, "Oh, it's macaroni and cheese." My mother begs to differ. "Oh no, not this. This batch is full of the harvesters of decay. Perhaps I will feed this to my raven later." The other adults are bored, and they don't like being contradicted. So the principal says, No, I'm sure. This has the consistency of macaroni and cheese." And she's a little mad when she says it because she assumes that my mother has told her to put her hand into something that will stain her nun getup. And really, all of the adults are kind of pissed off now. They're just like, What is it? Tell us, tell us. And Ivy's dad finally insists that we turn the lights on, demanding enough of this foolishness. So my dad flips the light switch on behind him. And it takes a moment for all of us to adjust to the harsh brightness of the room. Of course, by the time they'd all gotten their bearings, the giant night crawlers in the bucket of dirt my mother was holding had slithered halfway up their arms. Holy fuck, it's worms. Live, squirming, right out of the fucking ground worms. And these three jerks are elbow deep. Oh, it was fucking awesome. I mean, I am 9 years old, and I'm sitting there looking at my school principal covered in worms and screaming her fool head off. And the other two, they're in a panic. I mean, they are so crazed with disgust that they managed to take out the entire murder kitchen in their mad frenzy to shake off the worms. Their shrieking continues, and they race right up the stairs and out the front door. Our parents are just heaped together, laughing their asses off. And when Bobby and I look at them, hoping for some sort of explanation, all we get is, "Happy Halloween, kids." That was the last tour to go through our haunted house, but that was just fine with me and Bobby. The sight of our principal and classmates' parents fleeing the scene in terror had kind of made us temporary heroes. And we never did let on what had scared the adults so badly. It was more fun to just keep people guessing. And it is worth mentioning that after that incident, I never got called down to the principal's office again. So I guess it's safe to say that Halloween is pretty fucking awesome at any age, not just when you're 9. And as for me, well, I'm just going to keep watch for any openings at our local haunts here in New Orleans. Because I'll tell you, I've got some ideas on how to make things really scary. Cheers, y'all. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Unwritable Rant podcast. So coming up through October, I have all sorts of Halloween-inspired stories for y'all. I'll be sharing a couple of my favorite past Halloween episodes, as well as some very new and very scary bourbon-soaked stories. Make sure you head to theunwritablerant.com to catch up on back episodes of the podcast and click that little buy me a drink icon. Because when you do, you will be taken to a secure PayPal page where you can make a one-time donation to this show. You'll keep me in booze and I will keep you in boozy stories. Hope y'all have a great week. I'll be back next Sunday with more bourbon-soaked stories. Cheers.
Go to theunwritable.rant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter @MorningNeurosis.
Girl, you as pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton lady. Hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You